I'll forget to do that.
Okay, by me.
And I really have to record this meeting because I can't moderate and present and take notes all at the same time. It's just not possible. I'm going to also have people put, instead of doing this meeting invitation grew to a lot of people. So I'm going to have people put your names and what your kind of tech specialties are in the chat so that we have that as a note instead of a 25-minute long set of hellos in an hour-long meeting.
Sounds good to me. I'll put mine there right now.
Great.
Hey, morning. How's it going?
Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining it.
Of course.
I'm so excited about how this project is rolling out soon.
Yeah.
You just keep like connecting a few more little dots and people and ideas, and I'm really looking forward to doing this. So this is all because of you.
Wow.
We would be doing it anyway, but we do it because of, it's very good. So people are joining little by little, and I was going to have everybody do introductions, but if you would just instead kind of introduce yourself in the chat, because with this big of a meeting, introductions will take 25 minutes of an hour, and I want to be considerate of your time. But I know it's an exciting moment where not all of these people know each other, and it's I miss meeting competent, smart people in person and getting to know them and getting to have them on our team. So I'm sorry we won't have enough time to really chat and say hello and introduce ourselves, but thank you for all being here. It is a minute after, and I'm gonna just I'll repeat the please introduce yourself in the chat request. And if you scroll to the top of the chat, I put the links to the things I'm going to show you in case you didn't have time to review the information in advance. They were attached to the meeting invite, but I know everybody is pretty darn busy. So just to make it convenient, they'll be in the meeting notes here again if you want to go look. I also put the questions we're going to discuss, which is really the super important part of this meeting. And I know we could have scheduled an hour and a half, 2 hour or 3 hour long meeting, but everyone is so exhausted with Teams meetings that I just thought I'd try and have us be thoughtful and efficient, but I am completely available for any follow-up conversations you might want to have about this or small group meetings or whatever. So my name is Jennifer Chenoweth, and I am the museum site coordinator, or AKA manager and curator of this beautiful Oakwood Cemetery Chapel. It's on the grounds of our historic cemetery that was established the same year Austin was renamed Austin from Waterloo in 1839. And some of us work in the history area. A lot of you work in technology and may be just as regularly unaware of Austin's history as most of Austin's citizens, because we don't have a great way of we don't have a bullet for Austin, we have a bullet for Texas, but I'm working on kind of creating those historic resources because all of those people created the history that is Austin. And so that's the story we're kind of trying to tell here. So with us, instead of doing single introductions, I'm really just gonna introduce Greg Farrar, who's on video here. He also works at the chapel as a part-time temp and also at the George Washington Carver Museum. But I had the pleasure of meeting him because he came to the cemetery to visit his ancestors with his family. And we had just opened as a visitor center, and I kind of got so excited about meeting him and his family that I begged him to come work for me. That wasn't on his plan, but he did, and he's worked for the chapel for 2 years. And what he has been doing is help research the records of the people of color and the other people buried in the segregated section of our cemetery. And he helps hold us accountable for doing it right. And it's a fantastic honor to work with Greg and have his actual ancestry and family heritage hold PARD accountable for really sitting in the space as a site of conscience of the way people were treated with systemic racism in the past that created legacies of impoverishment and discrimination into problems some of you, perhaps in the housing department, are still trying to solve today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and, Greg, say hi.
Hey there. Well, thanks for that amazing introduction. I'm just, happy to be able to help out in any way I can. So I appreciate it.
So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen to just show you a few things that are relevant to our meeting. And the first one is going to be this map. So this is a bird's eye view drawing. Some of you may have seen it before, drawn in 1873 of what Austin looked like. And in 1873, it was 1.93 square miles. The UT would be up here. This is the Capitol. This is Congress Ave. This is where Central Library is now. And this is the cemetery. So 1873, we'd already been here for a few decades, but this is what the cemetery looked like. So how did we get from there to a 40-acre cemetery, which would be much larger than this small tract? And how were people of color buried here in this segregated section? In this view, this would have been post-Civil War and 2 years after the train arrived in Austin, which helped Austin grow through immigration through Galveston and Houston. So that is the context for how we got here. So if you go back to this, we're trying to geolocate all these people that lived here were buried in the cemetery and their histories and how they lived together and knew one another, and how we get from there to contemporary Austin through a whole lot of boomtown growth spurts of Austin. So I sent this out before, but there's this video that Greg created. I shared it in the chat, which I would encourage you to watch, which is Greg's research that preceded the All Together Here symposium we produced last October, a year ago. And that has just been awarded a Preservation Austin Award because what we do is look at the fact that this chapel, which was built in 1914, was built over the graves of 37, 38 people. And a lot of those people had been really disregarded in history. There was no known location of where they were buried. They weren't included on a map. They were mostly recorded in a hand ledger, but we have over 40 people whose names didn't even get on there who were of Mexican American descent. They were just listed as Mexican. We have a number of people who died while enslaved, and it only lists their slave owners' names and not their own, and not much about them. So we're trying to make an equitable memorial and honor of these people and find out how we visualize this section of the cemetery. I'm going to try and jump forward on Greg's video. You can see, if I can get this to play a little bit, that area out in the field looks like a grassy field, but Greg has documented the thousands of people who are buried there, and only 10% of those at best have headstones. So people misinterpret this area as being unused, grassy place to walk your dogs, but is not actually the case. We also worked with Public Works, and Ishka helped create this and presented this video, which is also in your chat. We did a drone survey of the segregated section of the cemetery, and he used that to test different 3D modeling platforms, and he presented it at Texas GIS Day. And so we've already done some of the kind of basic work to get through this project. And because of this research that we did, that helped us get this very prestigious National Endowment of the Humanities grant. It is for a digital humanities advancement grant, and that means we're doing a cutting edge experimental project in the humanities, and we document everything we're doing, as in recording this meeting today, so that we can be very transparent and share that with the public so that other people can learn from our mistakes and successes. And that we can also, and we can go back and apply for a larger grant to possibly expand on this project or do one for all of the cemeteries. So that is a super exciting work that we get to do with this. And I'm going to read you the specific language of the grant. The title is Creating Community, a Geographical Approach to Inclusive History at Oakwood Cemetery. And our project is to construct a digital model of a 3-acre segregated section of a historic cemetery. Men, women, and children buried in the 1880s were of African American, Mexican American, and European American heritage, segregated due to race and class. This level 1 grant project completes a 3D spatial analysis of monuments and adds the potential burial locations of approximately 88% of burials that people cannot see. Less than 300 monuments exist in this 3-acre area that holds 2,731 burials. Therefore, it is difficult for the public to imagine that this grassy area is full of unmarked graves of people who were marginalized in both life and in death. Poorly kept and incomplete records add to the frustrations of people researching their ancestors or their cultural history. Our model of this area combines photography and LiDAR, adding historic data, including photo, video, exhibits, and legacy maps. The project culminates in a community outreach call for additional historic information. So that is our challenge of what we're going to do. I'm going to show you the timeline for this project that we've created, and this is a working draft. Things shift, contracting takes longer than you think, but here we go. So I've highlighted in yellow your role, your tech advisors, and you've been invited here to this meeting that is in fact happening in November. And then I will return and invite you again to another meeting that will happen hopefully in May, when the focus group and the recommendations have been completed. What we do between now and then is work with a few community experts, including Dr. Maria Franklin, who is an African-American archaeologist at the University of Texas. And she helped us with our symposium last year and is a subject matter expert on archaeology, people of color, and cultural practices in Austin at this time. She also brings with her a whole lot of expertise on funerary practices and her colleagues in that field. With her, we'll be joining Dr. Tara Dudley, who is a architectural preservation and history expert for the city of Austin. I'm sorry, I got a text, I can't get distracted. I'm very easily interrupted. Dr. Dudley is an architectural preservation expert and professor at the University of Texas. And I met her when she was here at the cemetery researching the monument of an African-American stonemason who's buried here. And so she is an expert on the material world and the architectural artifacts of Austin. And these monuments are that. So when we envision digital new monuments, or however we want to do that, we have to kind of look at the built environment of what is here and what it meant at the time, what the remaining monuments symbolize, and how we might look at the past to see what might have been here. Could be wood monuments, other things. Then after we will meet, our experts will meet. We're going to facilitate small focus groups and community engagement with descendants of the cemetery. and other subject matter experts and community stakeholders with these faculty leads. The focus groups will be facilitated by a communications firm so that we make sure we get everybody heard and listened to. We get all of our questions about how those people would like this part of the cemetery memorialized digitally, what they want in the model, what will be the most accessible to most people. And then we come back to you, and with that vision that the community creates, we're going to build this 3D model. And so I'm introducing the project to you. We're going to today speculate on potential digital platforms, whether we can do this in-house and pay a different department to create this, whether we prep some of the work ourselves in-house, or whether we send it out to a different 3D contractor to create the model. And then they have a little less than a year, once we get through the RFP, if we need to do that, to create this 3D model. We will have created all the data for them. And then we release it to the public, hopefully in a way that allows people who have been marginalized in life, their ancestors have been marginalized, to trust us to share their family stories. So that is the timeline for the project. And I'm going to close that out. And that's all of the screenshot resources I'm going to share with you. Let's see. For those who joined a few minutes late, please introduce yourself in the chat. I didn't want to spend our hour-long meeting, though I would love to be meeting you in person, learning who you are, what department work from, what your technology expertise is. I will record this meeting and we'll make it available to City of Austin staff. So if there's someone after the meeting you feel like we could share this with, please let me know. And then let's see, I think I'd like to kick it off, unless Greg has any big suggestions of another question or something I missed in my introduction. We'll kick it off with a discussion. I'm going to ask a couple different questions. To create a 3D model of the 3-acre section of cemetery, what software platforms might we consider? But before we officially launch with that question, Greg, did I miss anything you'd like to include?
I think that was pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Anybody else really did I miss any big framework of what this project is? And if not, we might be able to just answer those questions as we go. Allison?
Well, I would like to preface this that I am building a hub right now. Marvin, you probably, and a few other people here are very familiar with ArcGIS Hub. So I'm starting to build that out at the moment for a one-stop shop for anything related to the communities, distributed collaboration, that sort of thing. I would like to also preface it with a very strict database management guidelines from everybody else. Ishka, if we share that stuff, in the hub, that way people can see the stuff. And then I was also thinking about, penetrating ground penetrating radar for that site as well, and not just the drone footage as well. So that's kind of where I'm thinking in big picture. For the future, Marvin, you can probably discuss about open data and, hub type stuff as well. But I think most GIS people on here understand what the ArcGIS Hub is. So that's where I'm thinking in the future is everything in Hub that's accessible to citizens or people doing surveys for us, that only certain people can see things and the public can only see certain things. So that's all.
Ishka, did you have anything you wanted to say at this point?
At this point, maybe just answering questions and provide feedback or, guidance on what can be used and stuff. So pretty much I come from the area of actually using drones for flying, for, photogrammetry and stuff. So yeah, so it's not only drones and interaction, but also other, options for, generating digital data, laser scanners and other stuff. But yeah, just provide some feedback on that one. So yeah, if
Thank you.
anybody has questions, I can answer those.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched your video. 'Cause it takes for me some digesting. It's like that, but you put all the words to it. So thank you. So how do we create a 3D model of this section of the cemetery? And what software platforms might we consider? There are lots out there. I could give you another 20-minute introduction on some of the options there are in the world, but I really want to ask you. So instead of telling you what some of our options are, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the software platforms we might consider?
I can answer questions too and this stuff too. So I mean, like the idea to this stuff, it's how you look at it, what you try to, use to generate the data. If you look at photogrammetry, like drone generating data, then pretty much, you'll have to process that data. I mean, like it can be flown with different, specific platform. It doesn't matter as much, how it's flown. It just matters that the data was collected to be processed afterwards, because we have multiple platforms that can be flown. Most of the data, I mean, is flown, using like either like a DJI, drone or so. But at the end, all the products were the same, so pretty much, you're going to get, either like native shots, top down, aerial on a like a lawnmower pattern or cross lawnmower pattern. And then from that on, you can generate the product. You might get, like oblique shots, and that's typically what we're going to use for, 3D modeling, like the 3D data. So, and those ones we have like, especially like when it comes about drone flying or, the data collected from the drone, it has downsides, has like limitations, so if when you think about the drone flying, you have a camera with your sensor, the accuracy of the data that's, generated from the, from the camera, it's based on the, the quality of that sensor. Now, when you think about the camera, think about like being outside. If you cannot see behind the tree, you cannot get the data behind the tree. If you're on the top of a tree and it's under the tree, you have to figure out another way to collect that data under the one. So that's where is the mix of like both top-down shots and oblique shots, because the oblique shots from multiple angles can get you that data under the tree. And as long as it's like, if that sensor is very like sensitive, like, very accurate, you're gonna get, good, quality data out of that one, yeah. But of course, it also has to do with like, the altitude you fly. You can fly closer down to the ground. There's a limitation to that one, like where you past that one, you cannot, you're not going to get better data, So for example, they say like, if you fly like, less than 80 feet, you're not going to get better data because of stitching. If you fly on top of the grass, there's no tying points in between, the elements, yeah. So typically it's a recommendation like altitude, based on that altitude of flying, you're going to get the GSD, like, ground sample, distance value that gives you the resolution of the data, So, I mean, that's technical terms, but, from that one, when I say about it, it's like, think about like your data collection, let's say sensor, it's your camera. It's the camera. If that's a very good camera, you're going to get, very good data out of it, yeah. So when it comes about platforms, it's about the processing, So for us in-house, you can do like, desktop processing. That means, you're going to do like, based on your machine. If you have a power machine, and depending on the provider, about the desktop apps, and then in the cloud, processing, So some of the desktop apps, you can start, like in the process of assembling the data together on your desktop, and they send the whole processing, part to the cloud, So it kind of save on the time and money, like, it's like, rather than doing on the desktop where I'm limited by my machine, I can send the processing to the cloud, yeah. But the front end where you assemble the data together, where you QA/QC the data, is done, like typically on the desktop app, yeah. Now, when we tested, like for this process, for this project, we tested, the apps, we tested like, the DJI, we tested the S3, the S3 John to map. We tested, the AG Soft Metashape. We tested Recap. We tested from Autodesk. We tested Bentley Context Capture. We tested, I guess, Pix4D. So pretty much on that one, now when it comes about like the platforms, think about like Pix4D, for example, Pix4D is like, supposedly the gold standard when it comes to photogrammetry. Like, I mean, like, it's like the mix and match, like the best, of the both like worlds, like if affordable or all of that stuff. When it comes to Pix4D, I think about also like the S3, the John to map, uses a Pix4D engine. So whether they use the Drone to Map or the Pix4D, if they use the same engine. It's only that the engine on the Drone to Map, it's a light version. So if it's about like, using the, Pix4D or Drone to Map, I would rather go Pix4D because they have the full engine. So rather than the small engine. But we tested all this, let's say with, I can give you the platforms, and based on the quality that we try to get at the end, I chose, that one based on all the stuff, I chose the context capture. Yeah. So Bentley context capture. That's because, pretty much, at the time, the context capture, it was like, it was formerly known Oakwood 3D. It was purchased by Bentley a while back, and this, like, this platform, it's typically geared towards macro mapping. Yeah. So they do like, this stuff, not only like drone, they do like airborne data. So, from like airplanes with cameras, we can generate like, models of the whole city and stuff. So because of it, one is like, we do a good job in macro modeling, but we notice like, based on the result at the end, we did the best job at generating the most amount of data from the data that we push in. So pretty much we had the same data set for the Oakwood. We had the same data set, and pushed it, on all these platforms, and look at the output at the end. The output can be a point cloud. It can be like a mesh, but it can be processed. It can be like, for example, a KML product. And so, it can publish to Google Earth. But to look at all this stuff, and it's like, okay, the best output at the end, it would be the context capture from Bentley. So this is for us, in-house, of course, we're like, and this is based on our experience, what we did in-house. Now, keep in mind that, public works, we don't do this stuff for a living. We don't reconstruct stuff. We just, play around with this stuff with like, and we try to use the technology to our advantage. We have in-house, like, we have a couple of like drones, but the one that we use for this project was a RTK drone. So pretty much it's a more accurate drone than the typical drones, which is made specific for surveying purposes, mapping surveying. So because of it, it's with that in mind, it's used for the kind of reconstruction of data. Now, of course, looking down the road, might be, as I said before, this might be a component like, like a mix of lots of technologies. Can be like drone mapping, can be on the ground mapping, like, for example, with your phone or some kind of stuff, because you can do like drone mapping with your phone. Because, I remember, Jennifer, when you said about like, for example, you want more quality maybe on the headstones. It's like, no, from 80 feet in the air, you're not going to see the headstone, unless you kind of complement with some other shots on the ground and stuff, So that's as it's a mix and match of multiple type of point cloud platforms. It could be like drone, can be like laser scanning, can be like your phone, like scanning the headstone, and then try to push that one in the system at the end, like as a patch on top of the other one. But yeah, it can be lots of stuff. And as I said before, just as a reminder, we're not, a public works. Yes, we are looking at this technology. We use it, like for a couple of our projects. But, it's like, this might be like something we can do in-house. But sometimes, depending, maybe you might push this stuff maybe to consultant that does a better job at this stuff, It's just that we know on our end what we tested, what, pretty much this is what we have, so.
Ishka, you pretty much just proved how much smarter than me you are. Thank you. I am humbled to get your help and with this. So I think what I heard was that what you've already done is test all of those 3D mesh software platforms, and you liked the Bentley context capture. Mm-hmm. And I also just wanted to ask the group if they know anything at all or would have anything else to add to that recommendation that we go to Bentley context capture, or if you would like to discuss that any further. While you're thinking about that, and before we move on to another big question, Ishka, maybe you can answer something else. So you were just saying the question I had, which is, can we patch in higher resolution photos of the monuments onto the 3D mesh?
It could be done. So there is like, the mesh itself. Yeah, so kind of give an idea. The mesh itself is, you don't just generate the mesh. Yeah, so from the points, so from the pictures you take, stuff, the software what generates, the first product from the software what comes up, it's a point cloud. So pretty much, based on your resolution of like how much, you want to process, it generates for each, pixel that generates your point and an RGB value assigned to it that gives you the color. So if you look at it from the, from far away, it looks like an image, it's beautiful. If you come close to it and stuff, you're going to see the points, like, because you come close to the data. Now, what the software does in the end, it takes this point cloud data, interpolates it, and generates you a mesh. So for each of those points, it colorizes it and gives you that 3D faces together and gives you that mesh. Yeah. Now that mesh, the idea of this stuff, let's say if you have a point cloud of the photogrammetry and you have the point cloud, let's say of like headstone, yeah, you could technically edit the point cloud data and replace, maybe let's say if I had the headstone from the photogrammetry, it's not that as accurate. I could, replace that one with the mesh from the, from your phone. It has to be like auto rectified and all that kind of stuff. But at the end, you're gonna take the same point cloud data, let's say is a hub or like a data storage of the point data, where you replace data. It's like, okay, I got new data for this data set. I'm gonna replace it here, generate a new mesh. Pretty much is an evolving mesh. Yeah, I don't think you can edit the mesh itself with another mesh to put on top of it one. It's much easier to just let the software do the meshing again. It's always processing ongoing. I get new data, I'm gonna update it, the point cloud data, generate the new mesh and so on. Yeah. So maybe somebody else knows maybe different, but this is the photogrammetry, the way it works. You get the point cloud data is taken and then generates a mesh from it, with the whole stuff. So
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So do we, unless anyone else is welcome to jump in here, by the way, do we have a license for the Bentley context capture?
Yes, we have an ELS agreement with with Bentley, and obviously it's I guess, I don't want to see like it's a citywide, I guess because it's department. Each department, has like an agreement with Bentley. For us, the public was of a ELS agreement with Bentley, but we can use pretty much any software and stuff. Of course, we're going to charge you a different way, the way we charge you for it. But, the context capture is part of that agreement, Now, if we think about using context capture and we try, because, for example, let's say I have like the site that I had to process, and for like Oakwood, it was like maybe how long it took me for me to fly, maybe an hour to fly the whole site, and that was like a quarter of it. So pretty much it took the 1 hour to fly it, to process it, on my desktop machine. It took like, to get the data that I wanted, it took maybe like 3 hours. Yeah. Now they say like, if you take, rather than processing on your desktop, if you send it to the cloud to process, might be faster, so sometimes we give you an idea of like, oh, it's 8 times faster. So for example, the Bentley, like if I process a site, it takes 3 hours to process, like, oh, it takes maybe 88 times faster. So based on that one, you might think about maybe putting the data together, on the desktop and send it to the cloud for processing. But of course, the processing in the cloud, we're going to take some cloud credits because we don't do it for free. But so yeah, we have to think about that one. Yeah. So.
Okay. What outputs can context how would people, the public, our staff access that? Like how do you get into the door of context capture?
So I guess when you say like the context capture, processing like like the outputs for it, and it can be like different type of. So you remember when I said about the type of data that is processed, point cloud, meshes, like for example rasters. It can be like the stuff, like for each type of this about different formats. Yeah. Now the industry standard for point cloud, it's ALS file. Yeah. So pretty much typically every photogrammetry processing software, you're going to generate your point cloud at ALS file. And this one, it's an industry standard, open. I guess I don't know if it's open source, but it's industry standard, and all the data comes in ALS format. Stuff. Now, as for point cloud, when it comes about like, for example, like some of the software, depending on the stuff, it processes, like maybe other type of formats, like XYZ, PTS, or other formats for the stuff. But the standard, it's an ALS file. So with point cloud, when it comes about meshes, the meshes can be processed like an OBJ files, can be like there are different formats, we have like industry standards, and most of the platforms we're going to process that same type of formats. Yeah. Now, there are some of them. We're going to process maybe extra formats with the other ones. And we notice with context capture, they typically add more formats than the other ones, So there's this, they provide the default ones, but they also add on top of those ones, yeah. So I can give you like maybe offline, I can give you a list of the whole formats. But when it comes about point cloud, it says the LS files. When it comes about meshes, about like OBJs, like I forgot what the ones, might be even Google ones. You can process you can export the data, for example, like as a S3 scene package, yeah. So maybe this data it can be served, to the public as an like S3 scene package, because you can export this stuff, outside to S3 and then push it, via Allison or stuff. It can be pushed to the hub, And then from there, pretty much the idea to this stuff is like, I don't want, I don't like a single solution that does it all. Yeah. So the stuff, so for example, yeah, S3 comes, S3 tells like, oh, we have a processing software, we have a photogrammetry, and it's part of this solution from field to finish. Now, for me, it's like I try to get the best product for the type of task that I'm doing. Yeah. So for me, the way I look at stuff is the following. Like flying the software, flying the flights, stuff that you can use the DJI drones and you can get the data, we can get the images. Yeah. Processing software might be done maybe in the Bentley product. Yeah. Now publishing that data to the cloud, to the user end, to the user end, it can be done via our in-house RGS, solutions, because I mean we have our whole infrastructure is built on SA products, So I'm not familiar too much of all the what's called all the offering of that stuff, but I know that this data can be published to the web via the S3 products. Yeah, can be RGS online, can be that kind of stuff. So Allison.
Quick question, and
Yeah.
this is for you and Marvin. Credits in hosting. That is the biggest question, right?
Yeah.
How many credits is this going to eat up? Like Marvin, I know you've put like, the cave type stuff, the virtual reality stuff out there. And Ishka as well, where it's, how many credits are we talking about to host this?
So yeah, without an understanding of how credits work and stuff, like what they use, maybe it's based on storage of how much stuff you stream, that's all. So without knowing that one, it's like for me, it's like I don't know, like I cannot give an answer to that one. So
as far as the VR project that we partnered with Jennifer to create, it's a self-contained application and it's hosted on GitHub. It does have a limitation on the size of upload, I guess, of the application, but I think it was maybe 1 gig, something like that. So we kind of kept it within that limitation, and all the 360 images were able to fit there. We do have other projects that are a little bit larger, such as the one that I think Trent Atkins and I worked on with WPD, and they actually contain 360 videos as well, which was much larger, but I believe they had their own hosting site that they published to. So the limitation was not a factor in that case.
Yeah, and maybe the question to Alta Vista might be maybe on the LOD, the level of this, like level display, like maybe from far away, you're going to use, like a lower quality model, while you get, closer and closer, you're going to get maybe a better quality, So I guess the platform itself should be able to handle that one, because I don't want to stream, my 1 terabyte model like from 1 mile away, so. Yeah.
And Ishka made a good point earlier about, from aerials, I guess the resolution isn't as detailed as when you're on the ground, which that's where you want much more information as far as visually, and that can be quite hefty the more images that you capture.
Yeah.
So for sure, that's definitely a challenge.
In the chat, Zachary Stern put in ArcGIS Urban, and I am tiny bit familiar with it just watching Esri videos, that it's basically a 3D city modeling software. Am I right about that, Zach?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much just based off of arc scene, like a local scene. So you just pull in 3D layers or regular 2D layers to provide information. There's attribute information behind it. And you have a nice 3D view to move around things, but within it, I mean, you can create scenarios and stuff to kind of test out different ideas for land uses. So that's not super applicable to what we're doing here, but it's another option if someone wants to look into it.
Is housing using that, or is anyone in the city of Boston using ArcGIS Urban?
We use it. We're using it currently on our Palm District plan, and partly it was, to be able to show people what the existing land use looks like, what kind of a business as usual scenario looks like if you just keep the zoning there and you could build to a full entitlement, and then like a preferred zoning alternative. But it's just able to not only capture existing 3D images, but to build new 3D images there as well, based upon kind of certain typologies that you program into it. So that's kind of the nice part of it.
Allison?
With urban, I assume that that's not part of our enterprise license agreement, or do we have to purchase an extra license for that, or do we have like 5 licenses that we can actually, check out, Zach?
I know we purchased an extra. Yeah, you have to get an extra license for it, and housing and planning is purchased extras. It's not super expensive though. I think it's like a couple thousand, if that.
I was networking with one of our colleagues in Austin Fire Department, and she's trying to get firefighters to use the Capture app to talk about what's on the ground at buildings, and they don't actually have an inventory of multi-rise buildings in Austin. So you can imagine that ArcGIS Urban would be really helpful for fighting fires and showing up for public emergencies. So
Yeah, well, I'm looking at on I know the fire department, the initiative and stuff. It's just a matter pretty much they reach out to me also because it's about maybe getting Revit models or some kind of models of the buildings to know the floor planning, to know maybe the quickest way to access a specific floor. It saves lives and stuff. So yeah.
So what I think I'm hearing, Allison and Zachary, is that it is possible if we detail out this model within Bentley Context Capture, we can then export it into an potential Esri product, which we also have a license for. And though we will need to find out how many credits and the hosting for this data and the costs involved, that is a potential way we could host this model that we then contribute to over the data to through the database Allison is building over time. Is that correct, Allison Ishka?
I assume, I have to look at ArcGIS Urban and stuff. It looks like it's another platform that looks at the data which you have existing and, kind of looks against other type of data and kind of makes an analysis of the data, So, yeah, for me, it's like, I get you the data pretty much at the end, let's say I'm going to get you the 3D mesh or 3D model. Best pretty much, then you have to figure out where to publish it, for the user to see it, because not every user has access to the app to see the data, So you want to publish somewhere where you can make it interactive. So.
Speaking of making it interactive, does this ALS file, is it the type of file that one would import into a gaming environment? You
could, up to a point, you could, generate the data, it has to be a specific format, it has to be outputted, so it is if the platform itself doesn't export to the type of format that the gaming takes, there are all the if there's other software we can do that one, so there is let's say, and to this one comes to mind, FME, so pretty much from safe, you could, FME processing formats, back and forth, and I know that some people, for example, they even generate like a Minecraft map of some data, like a 3D data. So there is even if it doesn't process, this type of formats, but generate that stuff, I have to do a bit of research, but yeah, this type of format that's done outside can be published depending to the type of gaming environment you want to get there, because I remember, when I remember about stuff, talking about stuff, I remember the Unreal environment, like the Unreal, where, for example, when it happened in France, like Notre Dame, cathedral, when it burned, they scan the whole Notre Dame, maybe years before, and they can reconstruct the stuff based on the laser scan of the stuff. So I assume it's possible, so.
Greg, I see your hand is up, and you may talk after I say this thing about you, but let's all imagine that Greg is visiting his grandparents, who are closer descendants to Reuben Shannon Lovingood, and they're too old to travel and to come back to the cemetery, but they would like to see the results of our work. And they're elderly, smart people who are curious about what's going on. A lot of our descendants might be in that category. So what kind of platform would we like to have Greg show this to his family, right? So Greg, I'm sure you had a different question than that, but like that's really our audience. We would love to teach Texas history to 4th and 7th graders with this too, but our real stakeholders in how this is going to be created and what they want are going to be descendants. So Greg, can you help us consider that and ask your question also?
Yeah, so the question I had was, when we talk about kind of flight altitudes, what kind of increments do you recommend? Like, you know, if you're flying a drone, do you recommend, say, hey, we need to get one pattern, one pass at 5 feet, you know, at 10 feet, at 20 feet, or are there certain increments that you recommend?
Yeah, so when it comes about like drone flying, you have to think about it stitching of like, you know, an image. Like when you take a picture of like a camera, it gets, you know, a snapshot of specific, like, you know, like say environment. Yeah. Now for the drone flying, you know, like in order for it to stitch together at the end, you know, like you have to think also about the camera. The camera has a distortion to it, has like accuracy towards the center, but distortion outside of the center. Yeah. So as soon as you get, you know, to the edges, you know, you can lose the quality of the data because of the distortion. So because of this, on the way like the drone, like the photogrammetry works is like, you know, you take, you know, like a lawnmower pattern, it goes like a lawnmower pattern, but it has an overlap of imagery. Yeah. So when I fly, you know, this overlap, you know, it has to exist. Now, very typical about overlap, you know, it's a side overlap and it's, you know, like forward overlap. So it's side and, you know, in between this image side to side and, you know, image, you know, going forward. Now, that overlap, typically it's an 80% overlap, side and stuff. So pretty much, you know, if I have to take an image like this stuff, I have to have an 80% overlap to complement, you know, so I have like a, let's say, close enough to like flat, you know, like display of the data that I'm collecting. Now, there's the first point. The second point is like, you know, in order for the software to stitch together, it has to have common points. If I fly, you know, the data at 5 feet, you know, let's say 10 feet altitude, and if I fly, you know, like I take a picture from the top down, I see a patch of grass, I cannot see any stitching point in a patch of grass. You know, it has to have like distinctive features. Yeah. So because of this issue, they say like, you know, the recommended minimum altitude below that one, you're not going to get better data. There's the whole stuff. So when it comes to photogrammetry, they say like the minimum, it would be like somewhere close to 80 feet, you know, above ground. Yeah. Now think about 80 feet, you know, it's like you might have some maybe like in the cemetery, you're not going to have that issue. But, you know, like depending on other areas, you might have maybe obstructions you have to go around, maybe like an electric pole, that kind of stuff. Now, I don't see anything goes, you know, past 80 feet. But 80 feet, it's a minimum and stuff. And that one gives you the most, you know, like, you know, typical that one, you're going to get, you know, something for like a resolution somewhere close to like, you know, 1 centimeter or less, you know. That means 1 centimeter like resolution for an aerial. Now, on 1 centimeter resolution for an aerial, you can pick up and actually identify type of plants, type of trees and stuff. So that's, you know, like the visual. This is from above, yeah. So I say 80 feet, you know, at the minimum. But for example, the cemetery, I flew it, you know, maybe at 150 or so. So for that one, you know, because, you know, as soon as you come closer to the ground, it takes longer to process the data. You're going to have more data, but you have, you know, so it's a balance, you know, with stuff. And it's just like depending on the case, you might get the data, you know, but the macro of the cemetery, you know, from like, you know, like from the top and complement whatever you cannot fill in, where you need more like closer, like, you know, like headstone or some stuff. You complement maybe with some LiDAR bits on the ground, you know, like, so for example, like, you know, meshing, you can use your phone, maybe you can use like laser scanner and then complement that data, you know, the top of the down, you know, it's combination. So, because yeah, I can show you like, you know, if everybody's in here, let me see here, because I can show you like maybe in a couple of seconds here. And I'm going to show my screen. Let me share my screen here fast. If I can see it, you know, and this is the model of this is the point cloud, you know, of the cemetery, you know. So, you know, disregard, you know, the black lines, you know, those ones were like the symbol, you know, they're taken care of. Now, if you come about in here, you're gonna see this is the data that we collected, and this is like the, you know, the chapel, yeah. Now the chapel in here, you're gonna see that, you know, as I come close to the ground, it was the point cloud, you know, it becomes, you know, you're gonna see like what you see from there, yeah. Now on this stuff, the chapel, you know, it looks good, you know, because I got, you know, like you get lots of shots around the stuff and it gives a pretty good, you know, mesh out of that stuff. Now when it comes about like a headstone, like, you know, this stuff, this is what you're gonna get, you know, from this model. You're gonna get the headstone. It looks like this stuff, but it doesn't necessarily gives you like, you know, who's on the headstone or some stuff, you know. So based on that one, you're gonna see like in here. and the quality of the mesh of the model from Vet1, you're gonna see like, here for this stuff, this is not what it looks like, maybe in the field, it's close enough. It does, represent. So maybe for this case, for this stuff, you're gonna complement, like the data from the photogrammetry with somebody, scanning this stuff around and replacing this area of the mesh or the point cloud with the data from the, from the on the ground scanner, so.
Okay.
But yeah.
I think this is incredibly useful information, and I also want to make it relevant to everybody else in the meeting. So I think what we should do is, Ishka, return to another meeting with you and your supervisor to talk about some more of the specific details. Mm-hmm. What I would like to hear from the rest of the group is how this might be useful to your work. What type of model and platform would you be able to use? Considering that the cemetery is just an example of a project. Like, I really love the idea of collaboration, and I know we are all busy with our own department initiatives, but how do we move forward in collaborating with this idea as a benchmark, and how might your department use this project either as a benchmark or to contribute in community engagement for the public?
There was the line in the narrative, Jennifer, that talked about how many of the segregation faced by communities throughout their lives, whether it had to do with poverty or racism, followed these individuals even into death, right? Because of the segregated plots and centered parts of the cemetery. And so I think it's definitely the kind of work that our office could continue to share as an example of systemic racism and just the history of that racism in our city. I know that you also have a historical capture of the city's population, and that's absolutely something that we would love to be able to share in our website under the, we have historical population as well, a section on historical population as well as forecasts. And so that's probably an area where we would love to be able to link to something that that a project like this would come from. And so that's sort of how I think we might use that. I don't know if there's anything else in specifically relating to housing and planning, Zach, that you might want to speak to. But in terms of the history of racism and structural racism, and as well as the history of the population, those are two examples that I can think of.
So if you, Lila, would you want to link to a video or something interactive? Like, what would your audiences or people you're trying to reach to, let's say in your, for demographics, you're trying to get people to think about redistricting and representation and all of those things. So what type of audiences are you interacting with, and what kind of digital platforms might they be excited with or comfortable with?
Well, I think the example that you sent us of the Austin Through Time, where it has a combination of maps and narrative, and so it's got that sort of story map feel, along with some videos in it. I think that was really interactive and engaging because of the video, very educational. So I think, something that has those different components would be really engaging.
So my kids play video games, and on their big TV, which I'm like an old school Atari button person, there's an intro video in their video game that explains the characters and where they are and what the situation is. And then in the game, they go into it and interact. So I'm not sure if a gaming environment is the best way, but there's also a video component within a gaming environment that could be a standalone item. There's also the distinct activity at a cemetery is to walk out in this quiet, peaceful place and look around and see what you see there. And if we were able to mesh high-res photos on top of the add 3D, high-res images onto the 3D model, you could actually get just a little bit of a sense of the stone carving or the materials. But then you might look past the headstone you're looking at and see another familiar name on another headstone over there, which is more akin to the live experience of the cemetery, which Marvin documented in the 3D model of the old grounds. So I'm just wondering how to put all these kind of digital experiences that we're a little familiar. Some people are very familiar with one version, and we're all a little bit familiar with some of them together in a way that you could virtually experience the place when you live far away. You know, that you could really have you might have a avatar guide taking you along, talking to you if you want that, you know, just different ways into that. So any thoughts?
Jennifer, yeah, on that one, you know, like, don't they do that one nowadays, the realty business, where they pretty much will show you the house, and you can go like in a 3D tour of the house. We can go from pretty much like Google Maps for the house, you know. So you can take like a 3D camera, take pictures from multiple points and stuff, and just interact with that one, go through that one. And if you can say superimpose that one on top of a 3D model, you know, kind of complement that one, that would be maybe. I mean, it's possible nowadays. Looks like the technology is not that expensive. You just have to generate the data, you know. So
I was going to say that you know, a big part, I think, when you're starting to do research in a place that you're not familiar with or you don't live near, you have a tendency to try to use Google Maps and to see if there's any street view, you know, close by with a location or something that you're looking at. And obviously, I just checked it. Obviously, Google Street Maps will just take you to the start of the cemetery, so you can look and see what it looks like from the main gate. But there's no way that you could, you know, somehow go into the cemetery and, like, you know, move around. And maybe that might be a way to try to utilize 3D cameras. I know GoPro has, I think it's GoPro Max, which things are slowly starting to become a lot more, I think, affordable for kind of the everyday hobbyist or whatever. So maybe utilizing some 3D cameras in order to get that first person view of, like, you know, certain areas or walking down some of the roads in Oakwood. That might be a way where you can get some kind of a feel. You could have videos of, you know, walking around and stuff, but if you wanted a more interactive way, that might be one way to kind of do things. But yeah.
Other thoughts? Does anyone have any experience with augmented reality models where this same information, especially once we get historic information in Allison's database attached to those headstones, to where you would be taking the same 3D spatial model and being able to walk through the cemetery and see other things, like potentially the layout of all the unmarked graves and a potential of what we know about them. Does anyone else have any thoughts of technology, data, outputs, experiences that they would like to point out for this project? We don't have to have solutions, we're just brainstorming.
Well, let me preface, Darlene is building out cemetery spaces right now for all the cemeteries. We're trying to get that into Maximo at the moment. There are two different databases. One is points for monuments, which has a maintenance component with that, so that's why it goes into Maximo. And then there's cemetery spaces and work orders associated with that, but also it serves the public, which includes a lot of other data. So we have points and polygons for the cemetery main data that Darlene is putting together, or updating, I should say. So, and of course, you can't have spaces in the historic color grounds because it has not been there's no ground penetrating radar to tell us exactly how people are buried, so you can't parse that out into spaces. So that's one of the big things, but I'm not sure how that relates to the drone imagery and tagging that. But of course, with every point, we can have attached photos of those particular headstones, but that's for the monument points.
Yeah.
And not the spaces. But like I said, it lives in the SDE maint server at the moment. And then we'll be pushed out to ArcGIS Online for the other stuff. So it's a kind of a combination of a layer that serves two different purposes, Maximo and the public. So I just wanted to preface that way y'all know and of course that's going to take up a lot of space in ArcGIS Online as well. If you talk about how many spaces are in each of the 5 cemeteries, that's 50,000, 60,000 records.
Yes. So, let's see.
Yeah, I showed it on just FYI quick, I showed you kind of the idea,
Yeah.
So this is a 3D model and you can go to this is like stuff, you can go inside of it and pretty much see the, the whole stuff. It's built of images. Most likely it's built of a mobile, like an iPhone. You go and scan the whole stuff and put it stuff together. So just an idea.
Thanks, Shika. So, trying to be aware of the time. We're a little out of time. I think I'd like to talk to Ishka and his supervisor about the potential of doing this in-house or partly in-house and partly out. In addition to coming back and looking at what our stakeholders have recommended, does anyone else have any suggestions, want to be more involved, want to help with an RFP if possible? Is there anyone here who really wants to be more actively involved in this, or is this a good level of involvement for you? So please feel free to reach out to me after the meeting if you have more thoughts and ideas. It's a lot of information to cover in this short meeting. This is really kind of just what we're trying to do and how do we get there and how do we get it out to the world and how does this become a useful tool for other city departments, for other cemetery people, other places, and for going forward on collaboration with geolocated data, because it just seems like more and more to me that there's so much geolocated data that affects all of our jobs these days. So anybody else got anything to add?
Just from my side, just the last comment here is just think about this model or measurement stuff just as a layer, on top of other layers, just as the layers that you use. And, for Allison, you can add stuff on top of it. You can add any other overlays of data, So if you need, to map stuff specific one, you can add on top of it, So do not think about this is the end product. If it's not that it's just a layer in the whole series, series. So.
Thank you, Ishka. I am not a technology person. I'm a happy user and I have big ideas and I really, really appreciate all of your help, collaboration, and time on helping us figure out how to bring those to light and help us really represent the history of these people and tell their stories. Greg, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I had a quick question for Marvin. What did you guys use to capture what you just shared in the chat?
We're using what's called an Insta360 camera Pro, which has 6 cameras all the way around, 8K resolution.
Okay, cool.
I want to thank you all for your time, and please follow up with me if you have any other thoughts or recommendations or questions. We will be getting under contract and starting to hopefully have our first stakeholder meetings with the groups in hopefully January if all things go well. So thank you again for your time today and for all of your expertise and participation and being a resource to us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks, Ishka.
So long, everybody.
Thanks, Michael.